compliance. And so in this instance, because Lake Havasu Unified School District receives and expends more than $750,000 in federal awards, you're required to have this federal compliance audit, where it's a rotation of federal compliance programs that we test. This year happened to be nutrition cluster. Last year was Title I. I think actually special education, I think, was last year. Next year will be probably Title I. It just kind of rotates through the different compliance supplement programs based on what is either hasn't been tested previously, what's new. I can tell you now that the COVID ESSER relief program will be tested next year. So there's a tip for you already for next year. And then the final portion of the audit is the USFR compliance audit. So what the state does is that the Auditor General releases essentially this 24-page, 200 and something questionnaire, and the auditors are required to go through and answer yes and no to all of the questions within this. And it covers a lot of areas that you wouldn't think an auditor would. Most auditors probably aren't going to care about attendance or maybe student activities or areas like that, but because the state says, well, you have to look at this, we're engaged to perform that audit as well. And so you'll see today that I think essentially all the findings that we have today are going to come out of the USFR compliance area, because that is the most in-depth portion of, it's not just looking at a number and saying that this number is correct. It's saying, okay, well, this kid came to the school at 10 a.m. and left at 2 p.m. Did you accurately prorate that student's attendance? And so obviously, when you're dealing with lots of transactions like that, issues just arise. Okay, so our first, kind of visit to work on the audit was remote. Back in September, we were able to do a lot of the areas remotely. So thank you to the staff, to Mike, payroll department, accounts payable, all the different areas. They uploaded a ton of documents, scanned them in, and so we're able to do at least a portion of the audit remotely. And then, and that was over a bunch of different USFR areas. And then we were able to finish up the majority of these areas on site this trip. Federal compliance. We just wrapped that up, actually just a little bit ago, and glad to report that there are no findings for nutrition. So your federal compliance portion of the audit is clean. Anne was very excited, and she didn't didn't even have to show up to the meeting today. Financial statement areas. The areas we looked at primarily in our first visit, our remote visit, were looking at recalculating payroll, disbursements. The good news is all the bills got paid. Everybody got paid appropriately on payroll side, so congratulations there. We didn't have any findings over payroll. The next area was, and then in the final visit, now that the AFR has been finalized and submitted, we're looking at all the different financial areas: cash and investments, capital assets, leave, revenues, receivables, internal service, your employee benefit plan, the OPEB plan, all of these different areas we're looking at for this final visit. Okay, so a few areas we noted. Attendance, obviously, kind of generates the most findings because it's the most active area of that happens. So for student attendance for 1 of 15 entries reviewed, the enrollment date on the computerized attendance system does not agree to the date on the enrollment form. So just a matching thing. The dates have to be the same. For 4 of 15 entries reviewed, the USFR says that you have 5 working days from the time basically when the student enrolls in the school, you have 5 days to get that information into the system. And so you're supposed to document the date it was entered. And it may have been entered within the 5 days, but if the day is not entered or the day is not documented, then we can't tell if it was done timely. And then for 1 of 15 withdrawals reviewed, the withdrawal form was not signed by a district administrator. I will tell you that student attendance is the most common area for audit findings across the state of Arizona. And so it just kind of is what it is. So.
Do you mind if we pause to ask questions during, or is it better to do?
Yeah, for sure. I should have said that. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so for, if you wouldn't go, okay. So on that second bullet point where you're talking about it's not documented the date that the entry was entered. So in that case, you're not asking what student or what date the student was enrolled, but what date it was actually put into the computer system.
Correct.
That's the information that you need. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. exactly.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Why does a district administrator have to sign the form? I had no idea.
Yeah, it's just a state requirement that either it talks about a principal or someone that the principal has given that authority to.
So it could be a school administrator.
It could be a school administrator.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
all right,
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. So a lot of times when we think about the district, but you guys
Sure.
are thinking about
Right,
sites.
okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
No problem. Any questions? All right. So here's an area that actually you had some improvement. So over student activities, cash receipts, you're required to, if students have a bake sale, you have to say, okay, we got 10 brownies and we sold 8 brownies at $1 a piece, so we have $8, and you have to reconcile sales to cash collected. In the previous year, for 5 of 5, we had no reconciliation. For this year, we're down to 2 of 5. Student activities, cash receipts being reviewed, did not have that sales summary to reconcile cash collected to actual sales. Again, it's a pretty common area. Students are known to not always fill out the appropriate form. Okay, so a few areas for credit cards. Actually, Patty just cleared the second bullet, so you can cross that one off. I won't even talk about it. But for the first one, so for 1 of 5, and I think this is still being looked into, there was one of the USFR says if an employee utilizes a district credit card, they have to either put their name on the receipt and identify who the employee is, or they have to have some kind of log maintained that shows which employee had the credit card and used it. And so in this instance, I think the district are still looking to see if they can figure out which employee used the credit card because it was one of the fuel cards. And then once they can locate that, then they can determine if that employee had the signed user agreement on file. And that's one that can be cleared up. The second one was, Patty was just able to clear it up. It was an employee who in January of 20 bought a plane ticket for a conference that didn't occur. So we just got documentation, and that finding will be cleared up.
I do have one question on this slide as well.
Yeah.
Are student activities and PTA activities lumped into the same category, or are they separate?
They are separate. Yeah, PTA is like a parent-teacher. That's a not district fund. So unless an organization was maybe material to the district or a significant part of the district, because those organizations operate typically separately with their own 501c3 status, nonprofit status, they are not a part of the district audit. So yeah, this is just student-raised money that comes to the district.
Thank you.
Great question. Thank you. Okay. All right. So stewardship, we walked around. We were able to locate all of the assets. But we did notice that there was at least just a few damaged, or one damaged ID number for a tag, and so we were unable to read the ID number from the asset. Obviously, it probably got damaged in moving or something like that. So, again, not a huge area to be too concerned about, but it was there. It existed. Just the ID number was just a little smudged. This next one has to do with transportation, and so we were able to sit down with the transportation director today and kind of go over a way to fix this for the future. The state requirement says that when you're calculating the number of students transported, you have to come up with this formula and says you have to use at least 25 of the first 100 days to calculate the number of students being transported. And I think there was just a misunderstanding, and so just a single day was being used, just the 100th day was being used. But the way that the law is written, the way the requirement's written, you can pick any 25 days, minimum of 25 days, within the first 100 days, but you got to at least have 25 days worth of data to get your calculation. And I don't think this affects any kind of funding. I think it's just a number that gets reported to the state to tell them, we promise we are transporting kids at a certain rate. So. Okay, one of the kind of most common areas for school districts and just for the frustration of, I'm sure, the business office, but after the fact purchase orders. So this is where the employee takes it on themselves to, I really need that supplies for my classroom, and so they go ahead and they place the order. They place the order for the goods or service before they actually get the approval in place. So just recommending training and tightening that area up, ensuring that those after the fact purchase orders or after the fact approvals don't have to happen. Next one is a couple coding findings, but incorrectly coding a professional service. So the USFR, the Auditor General, they have a chart of accounts they release, and it tells you exactly where to code transactions. And so for one of the transactions we looked at, it was incorrectly coded. And then for the supplanting worksheet for CTED, for what used to be your old name of JTED, but now it's a CTED. The supplanting worksheet just had a understated number. The good news is the district was already it had already demonstrated that it was not supplanting, so that wasn't the issue. You're now not supplanting even better, or even less, I guess. I don't know quite how to say that, but you're going to work. The district is going to work with the state to figure out how to resubmit the report. Okay, so what's outstanding as of today? Currently, we are waiting on the single employer OPEB study. This is for the employees that are retired from the district and are still going to receive benefits for a while. So that OPEB study is currently being done and hopefully will be released here in the next few weeks. We'll see. Hopefully. We still have a few requests out for procurement, some attendance, some capital assets. We're going to run, since one of the big initiatives for the district this year was converting the way capital assets was being tracked from Excel into Visions, which took a lot of work and a lot of time from Patty. We're going to run some additional tests on that and just verify that the import went according to plan. So, and then we're also going to be doing some more internal service EBT test work in that area, so we're still not quite wrapped up with that section either. So what's next? So finalizing test work over financial areas. Like I said on the previous slide, there's still a few areas where we're still going to get through. Oops, sorry about that. Some dates to know about. So the district prepares what's called a comprehensive annual financial report, also known as the CAFR, and that's due by December 31st, 2020. And I think last year we did have to get an extension because of a delay in the OPEB plan study. We're not anticipating that this year. We think we'll be able to meet the deadline of getting that done by December 31st. And then there's the other two reports we talked about, the audit reports, the USFR, also commonly known as the USuffer. That and the single audit reporting package are all due by March 31st. And so we don't, again, anticipate any issues with that. The majority of our test work is wrapped up, so most likely the USFR and single audit report will be done early. Yes, ma'am.
On the CAFR report that's due the 31st.
Yeah.
And also the USFR single audit report. I know early on, and I'm just saying this for the benefit of some of our board members and our new superintendent, those are addressed, or at least the single audit reports are addressed to the board. Mm-hmm. So can the board receive a copy of that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe technically it's public information, so.
Sure.
But yeah, yeah.
And then I wondered if you could expound a little bit on the single employer, the OPEB study.
Yeah.
What that encompasses, and then also the internal service test work that you're doing for the EBT.
Yeah, sure. So the single employer plan is where at some point, and I can't tell you the exact date, but the district had always had a plan where if you worked for the district for a certain number of years, you got to have health insurance benefits for a while paid for, or at least at the same rate, which employees normally within the district get that same good health plan. Everybody wants to stay on the insurance for as long as they can. At some point, the district said, okay, well, we got to have, this is costing too much money, so we're going to have a cutoff. So only employees who retired, I'm not even sure what the date is.
2005, I believe,
Okay.
isn't it?
Yeah, July 1st, 2005. If you were hired after that, from July 1st, 2005 and beyond, then you'd no longer qualify for the benefit.
Perfect. So then what has to happen is, under the governmental accounting standards, they say, well, actually, this standard only came out a few years ago. They're saying that actually that represents a long-term liability of the district. To say that the district needs to plan and budget and have an idea of, we're going to have to pay down this liability over the next potentially 30, 40, people live a long time these days. So then the actuary says, okay, so here's a liability number associated with these people based on the actuarial tables of when they could live to, how much they're going to cost us, all these things. And then that liability gets reported within the comprehensive annual financial report, within the audited financial statements as a liability. And so you can see that number, I believe, is starting to go down a little bit. So as either employees retire or leave the district without collecting the benefit. Yes, ma'am.
I just want to clarify, so is it the length of their life, or is it until they're eligible for?
Until they're eligible, I think, for Medicare.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay, just checking.
And then your second question, I apologize.
The internal service test work?
Yeah. So this is for the self-funded plan the district has. So what we're doing is collecting financial information from both the EBT has their own CPA, which provides monthly reconciliations and monthly financial statements. So we're reviewing those, ensuring that the numbers we can be agreed to support. We're looking to make sure the contributions the EBT's recording makes sense with the contributions the district is giving them. We're doing analysis on the expenses and actual test work based on if we think that's warranted, because it is a whole separate. It's not part of the district internal controls. It's a whole separate internal control mechanism. So we're documenting the controls over there, and then also getting information from them in regards to, these are our estimate of claims payable, claims that were incurred by a certain date but paid after, and so we're auditing that information. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Any further questions from the board?
We will get a report regarding the EBT. We will get a report.
Yeah, and so I think one of the things that the district has done, at some point there was an election to have a completely separate EBT audit, but I think that was done for a few years, but I think the cost was probably a little prohibitive for having an entire audit done separately. So at this point, the district made the decision, and the EBT did as well, to have that audit contained within the district audit report.
Okay.
So you'll have to flip through the CAFR, the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, to get a detail of exactly the audit of the plan.
And then when we join with the city, you will continue an audit in the same vein, or how to?
That gets a little more complicated.
Okay, I bet it would.
So, so the reason why the EBT currently is presented within the district's comprehensive or financial statements is because you're the only person in the plan. So once you get two people in the plan and the liability is shared, typically that spins off to become its own entity. And so at that point, the EBT may have to contract for their own audit, and it will be no longer a part of the district audit.
Okay.
I would assume that we would still have accounting metrics that the NAEBT would have to report to us so that we could fill out whatever we need for our audits. I would assume going forward, even though they're a separate entity, that we would still, because we're using district dollars to contribute. So
yeah, and I would still expect them to give you the information you need to determine contribution rates and determine if you want to stay in the trust, to determine if it's the best option for the district. But
we're still working in the framework of last year. So
yeah, exactly. And correct me if I'm wrong, But that combination that you guys went to, was it where each entity still maintained their own self-funded area, or is it now just completely combined?
I think it's combined.
It's combined, but it's also recorded separately so that we
Okay.
can also see what our performance is and what our
Okay.
carry forward amount would be.
Okay, and that may complicate things even more, unfortunately, because if you're tracking it separately and you're going to maintain your own balance separately, that may be a little. We may have to have an offline conversation on exactly the audit for that. Typically, with the pools, I'm thinking of some of the other pools that we work with in audit. Each district throws in their contribution, and it just goes into a pool, and then you just close your eyes and hope the pool does well. But if you're actually maintaining your own set of financial statements within the pool, and it's coming out of, yeah. So,
I would assume that it may be different in years to come, but I think until we've fully gone through all of our dollars
Okay.
that are our dollars that
Okay.
are not going to the NAEBT,
Gotcha.
because we will have dollars left over,
Okay.
that's just a non-issue at this point. I think
Okay.
it's going to have to be separate until then.
But that does raise a question for me for future years. So if let's say that for our district, our claims comprise 40% of the total claims, does that mean that our liability is only 40%, or is it in the pool that Mr. Lausen is referring to?
Well, right now, all of our rates are different. So the rates that we pay on behalf of employees are different than what the city pays, which is different than what Kingman pays. So right now, the rate structures are different based on the actuary reports. So at some point, they would like to see that align a little bit better, the trust as a whole. But I think that us joining at this moment, we're still trying to figure out how that works. And to Ms. Cohen's point, that will happen, and we will make sure that there are accounting measures in place to make sure that money's contributed from the leftover funds, if any, from the LHS EBT are accounted for. And I think we have a plan already to make sure that happens, so that so we can make sure that those monies are definitely used for our employees.
Yeah, we do have other school districts that are part of different insurance trusts, such as the rural schools of northern Arizona, it's a lot of the Native American schools, and they all are essentially prepaying, they have balances with the trust that are being tracked separately. So the trust says, okay, this school, they gave us $1 million more than they had to, we're going to track that $1 million, and then they can determine how they want to use that money going forward. So there are definitely mechanisms that can be put into place to do that.
I wasn't trying to confuse anything. I was just trying to
No, this is-
make it clear it will be complicated. But the good news is that we can track down anything now because we have everything super transparent. I just didn't want to confuse it going forward in the future. It's just confusing this year, I think, and maybe the next couple.
Yeah.
I did have one other question. So you touched a little bit on how COVID will affect things in the future with the ESSER and how that's going to be something that's going to be coming up for audit next year.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that our financial team should be aware of that you can foresee that's kind of COVID related or going to be different for this next year?
I mean, obviously I think Mike is probably staying pretty on top of it, but, there's definitely going to be some, it's not kind of unknown right now what the state's going to do. I mean, right now they got all the federal money to backfill and to help with the budget process. So going forward, hopefully things turn around and we get back to a healthy place of a growing state economy. And then, but no, as far as any specific issues that I'm aware of, no. Like I said, there will be some additional compliance requirements that we're going to look at next year in relation to ESSER funds and also the ESG, the Enrollment Stabilization Grant funds as well. So those both might be tested next year, in addition to whatever compliance other program we have to roll in as well.
And what will make that, hopefully, knock on wood, a little bit easier is the fact that they those specific funds have a dedicated fund number in which we can track revenues and expenditures. So that'll help. They won't commingle in the general fund. It'll be easy to identify revenues and expenditures. So we're hopeful that that shouldn't be a big issue.
Yeah, it does seem like the federal government and the state have been leaning more toward the idea of providing flexibility versus just stringent, like this is the way you exactly have to do it, but they seem to be willing to provide some more flexibility. So I think that will probably continue going forward.
Any other questions or comments from our board?
Is this the end of the presentation, or?
This is, yeah.
This is it, okay, so I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
I have one comment, one question.
Yeah.
Can you approximate, do you have a guesstimate how many laws have changed in the USFR or federal compliance or the financial part of the audit since last year?
Oh, wow, you're asking me to guesstimate. I mean, so the USFR typically, I know there's at least about 10 new compliance areas that the state added on into the USFR that we had to look into this year. Some of them being related to, one of the things the state has to do is report it's called the SDER report, where you're reporting your number of teachers. And previously the state didn't seem to, I don't know, this year there's a new audit procedure to verify that the SDER report, this is a teacher report, actually has support behind it. There's been a few laws in the last few years in regards to procurement with ensuring conflict of interest information is documented more appropriately. Also ensuring that when you use a cooperative purchase, you have to not just go with the cooperative, but you actually have to document why you went with the cooperative. So there's been some additional requirements that have come out in those areas. And on the federal compliance side, it kind of, and so what they had done 2 years ago actually was they revamped the entire federal compliance. And so what they said, and so there weren't too many changes this year because they had done so many changes about a year or two ago. And what they said was they wanted to reduce the administrative burden being placed by the federal agencies on the entities. And so they went through and told each federal agency, okay, Department of Education, Department of Interior, you can only pick your favorite 3 or 4 areas that you want the auditor to look at. You can't just have them look at everything. You can only pick a few areas. So there were a little bit of changes in regards to that.
And I mention that because that's what comes to mind when I sit in this meeting from the first one that I sat in that was not a public meeting. So Thank you for mentioning that, and thank you for everybody here that supported that. That it does change every year.
Yeah.
So it seems really minute what you've brought up for our audit by comparison to maybe 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And then also it's constantly changing.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to say great job to everybody in the room that works on this and has to change their way of doing business to keep up with the changing compliance requirements.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, this is all, we're kind of coming in here and you can see back in that room there's a lot of paper. We've kind of torn apart everyone's offices for the last week or so. I see some head nods out there. And so we really appreciate all the hard work that goes into getting us ready for the audit and providing documentation. Everybody is very kind to us, so we do appreciate that. And that just might be the sugar talking from Halloween, but yeah.
Well, you all look so worn out. And I agree with Nicole, and I think that I know the whole board does. The 4 years I've been on the board, this is what we've been treated to during Halloween week, is these really nice reports with minimum little issues that if I were in your office working with you guys, there'd be a lot more, I'm telling you right now. So I appreciate what you do because I couldn't do what you do.
And just for the community that may be watching, I can't emphasize how unusual it is to have these in a public setting. So, that is just huge for our district to set that example, I think. because most people don't have these publicly. I know my first one was not public. So,
No, this is the only school district. I do other public meetings for school districts, but this is the only one when I go through like this. This is definitely uncommon. So.
uncommon's good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else from our board or anything from our financial experts here in the room? I know there's a lot of them.
Madam President, if I can just take a minute to formally thank those who are in the room and those who are not in the room. I'm behind the microphone, but it's definitely the progress that we've made over the last several years and that we're striving to continue to make even currently in this fiscal year could not happen without the people in this room and even those that are not in the room. So Alexis, Carrie, and Aaron, and Kathy, and Sherry, and Naomi, and Bonnie, and Kelly, and Laura, and Debbie, who are not in the room, Gail, and Pauline, Patty, who's probably not in the room because is she in the room? She's behind me. So, Anne, who just scored a perfect audit in the food service, and Gina, who is her equal partner in that, Todd in the warehouse, and Bobby in transportation. And just amazing group of people trying to do hard things, trying to make progress, trying to move to a new financial software system a number of years ago and make sense of it, make it more transparent, make it more user-friendly. And then I have these people who are never satisfied with just what is and are always looking for ways to improve. The audit findings reduction in student activities, Aaron, Naomi, Kelly, several people who have worked very hard in trying to organize meetings, sit down and review newly acquired, working with our auditing consultants to put together handbooks that make sense so that our site people can actually use them and reference them. It's just amazing. Complicate that with all the construction going on currently. I had the comment as I walked in from someone who said, "Oh, I haven't seen you all day," and it seems like that's more the norm because of everything else that's happening in the district. Everybody's pulled in 6 different directions, but we're making it work, and the audit is showing that. And there's still continued room for growth because their brains are continuing their wheels are continuing to turn because they can identify areas in which we can be even more efficient. And with that, I have even the site level, the AAs and the OAs, the building administrators, the club advisors. Again, that happened because club advisors at the school level were trying to implement what sometimes seems like a chore. And with those people who are already tasked at trying to teach kids and do all of their other assignments too, these things are just not made up. So when we're asking people to comply, it's not because I thought it was a great rule. It's because you're auditing us based on a standard and we're trying to meet that standard. So again, I'm the person behind the microphone today. Just humbled that these people work tirelessly day in and day out, both seen and unseen. Most of the times they're unseen, and most of the time they get a lot of heat because they're just trying to do what's right, and sometimes doing what's right is not always convenient or easy.
Hear, hear.
Yes. Thank you for saying that
Yes.
because it is a pleasure to be able to wrap up such a big topic in such a short meeting. I mean, we've only been here for 40 minutes, and this is the district. The finances of a district is such a large topic, but the fact that we can talk about some of the nitty gritty areas that need improvement, but have most things running very smoothly is definitely a credit to the hard work that happens that Mr. Murray was speaking about. So thank you. Okay. And thank you to Mr. Lauzon and your team. I did speak with him a little bit before the meeting, and he said that it was nice to be able to wear shorts here and feel comfortable because they traveled from Flagstaff, so hopefully there was a little bit of a hidden perk there.
That's right.
Yes. Okay. Do we have any updates or announcements that we need to cover? No? Okay. Well, then if there's nothing further, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
I second.
Archana Alliar,
Yes.
Nicole Cohen,
Yes.
Kathy Cox,
Yes.
Lisa Roman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Meeting is adjourned.